Right, I tell you what's also rude. What is also rude is telling women that being a woman is basically just a feeling you have on a Wednesday afternoon. That's kind of rude. That's something that an awful lot of women are speaking up about this issue, and indeed an awful lot of men. And sirs, gentlemen, we appreciate your help on this issue. But gender self-ID has become, frankly, a hornet's nest that many politicians are trying to escape from. The likes of Keir Starmer trying to row back himself on this issue, but not the SNP. The new leader of the SNP and new First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, has decided to double down on the culture wars he's imposing on the Scottish people and indeed the whole of the country by confirming that the Scottish Government will be launching a legal challenge against the bloc by Rishi Sunak's government in Westminster on Holyrood's controversial gender self-ID reforms. Well, let's talk about this with Chris McEleny, who's General Secretary of the Alba Party. Of course, that's a party of which Alex Salmond is leader. Good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Look, before we knew about all this, the details of this police investigation and the issues over this missing £600,000, the SNP campaign funds, and some big question marks about what is going on behind the scenes with the accounts of the SNP, the general view was that it was actually the gender self-ID reform battles that had been the straw that broke the camel's back when it came to Nicola Sturgeon's first ministership and her leadership of the SNP and forced her out. Looks like her chosen successor, Humza Yousaf, is doubling down on that, though. Why?
Well, he was referred to by himself as the continuity candidate, but continuity certainly won't cut it when it comes to this controversial bill. You know, against every measurable metric, this is overwhelmingly opposed by the people of Scotland. Now, the Scottish Government, they'll be presenting an argument that this is, Scotland versus Westminster, because they'll be trying to embolden their core support to disguise from the absolute mess that they've got themselves into. But the reality is you can't fight Westminster in the abstract. Everyone knows that the fight's over, for example, the Isla Bryson case, the male rapist. When this
the only kind of rapist under our law.
Yeah, well, exactly. If this legislation comes in, any man can say that he's then a woman, and you have to then treat them as a woman. Yeah. So that's the fight that Humza Yousaf's decided to die in a ditch in. And it's, as I said, it's a complete mess. What he could have been doing is he could have been taking the fight to Westminster on the fact that we were denied a referendum, but on that occasion, instead of putting that legislation through the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government went straight to the Supreme Court and were embarrassed. But for some absurd reason, this is the ditch that they're willing to die in.
Yeah, and this is the thing. A lot of people are wondering why that is. I mean, the stoking the culture wars. I know the Tories are often accused of this. I would accuse them for not fighting back quick enough, soon enough and hard enough on these culture wars. I mean, this idea is it's going to make easier for trans people to obtain a gender recognition certificate. That's legal recognition of their acquired gender. So you have self-declaration. It goes at the age of 16, not just at 18. And instead of having to live as the opposite gender for up to 2 years and be sort of signed off by doctors and be going through that process, you can basically just say, no, it's 6 months or something, I think, and a shorter period for those who are older. Now, we know, as we see, while that was going, being debated and being discussed in Westminster politics and in Scottish politics, we actually saw, as you say, Isla Bryson, a rapist convicted of 2 rapes, planning to be put into a woman's jail in isolation at first, and of course then we saw another case and another case. These aren't sort of one-offs. This is happening. It's already happening. It's already happening in jails in England as well, and it's something that I've been talking about for an awful long time on this show. Glad to see other people getting to arriving late to this party.
Yeah,
but
right.
But this thing, this did have the support of every party in Scotland. Major party in Scotland, other than I think your party to support it, and the Tories. Labour was supporting this. The leader of the Scottish Labour Party is calling on Keir Starmer to support this. The SNP are backed up in government by the Greens, and the Greens, that we understand, are insisting that they push forward on this measure and have this legal challenge. But you say the Scottish people don't want this. It's got pretty much zero chance of going through and winning in the courts, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds in legal fees on both sides, all paid for by the taxpayer.
Well, what you've got in this situation, you've got the green tail wagging the SNP dog. And tragically for me and others that believe wholeheartedly in Scottish independence, this is allowing the SNP to hold back the case for independence. But quite often you hear the argument that, well, 2/3 of the Parliament supported this legislation. but over 2/3 of the country are opposed to this legislation. It's the ultimate win-win for the UK government. Either this goes to whichever court it ends up getting determined in, and the Scottish government win, in which case the UK government are seen, ironically, as the defenders of women's rights against the Scottish government, or the UK government win, and Humza Yousaf is absolutely humiliated. So it's an act of extreme folly. It's so frustrating. I was willing to give Humza the benefit of doubt when he became First Minister, but the fact that he's decided to get himself straight into the mess that Nicola Sturgeon got the independence movement into within a matter of 1 week, 2 weeks, before he's even returned from recess. I think it's a great tragedy that he's been willing to almost jeopardise the independence movement to try and get his party out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, again, getting out of trouble, but isn't this a big diversionary tactic? We've got loads of issues, obviously, whole of the UK facing difficulties in terms of the economy. We've got big issues in terms of healthcare, schools in Scotland in particular, and a diversion about, this tiny number of people who are demanding gender self-ID, a complete diversionary tactic to start a big culture war that no one wants, and they're not going to win.
But that's the point. You're the Scottish First Minister. You're campaigning to break up the British state. So, of course, people are going to expect that you're going to seek battles with the UK government. But seek them on issues that you can build popular support behind. We've got 1 in 4 children in Scotland live in poverty, but we've got 80,000 million pounds of revenues will be going for the North Sea to the London Exchequer over the next 5 years. I mean, these are the issues that you should be seeking battles with Westminster on. Energy-rich Scotland, but we've got people having to wear coats in their homes. You will build popular support behind these issues, but going to court and try to, fight it in the abstract on a principle, but when at the end of the day, everyone, including the dogs in the street, know this is about your absolutely unwanted legislation. It's just an act of extreme political folly.
Chris McEleny, General Secretary of the Alba Party, thank you for that.